All right. Hello and welcome, everybody, to King County Recovery Conversations. My name is Christopher Archiopoli. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm excited today to have my guest, Michelle McClendon. I first want to thank the King County Recovery Coalition, King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Coalition, or King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division. We can thank King County Recovery Coalition twice because they're amazing, but also King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division, as well as our studio hosts here, Temple of the Trees. So thank you for joining us today. And so, as I said, my guest today is Michelle McClendon. I am honored to call her a friend, but she is also a coworker, a colleague, a peer. She holds a lot of roles in life. We work together at Purpose Dignity Action, PDA, on the LEAD program. We're both project managers for that program. She also works very closely with an organization called Civil Survival, and has her hands in every pot you can imagine. You know, there is no time where this woman, if we are sitting, she's like, "Oh, I know that person. Oh, I know that person. That person grew up with my son. That person grew up with my daughter. I've got that person's stuff in my garage." Like, it's like, okay, Michelle, who do you not know?
Right.
So I am excited for you all to know her now because she is a wonderful person to have in your life. So, Michelle, I would like to just start with giving you an opportunity to introduce yourself. That was my intro, but I'd love to hear you introduce yourself and share a little bit of your recovery story.
Absolutely.
And journey.
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and being in a space that's created, a safe, gracious space that's been created for us to tell our stories and share with other individuals, right? At the end of the day, I always say there is hope, right? Sometimes you just have to get in the right spaces with the right people and just know you're not alone. So with that being said, a little bit about me. My name is Michelle, as you mentioned before, Michelle McClendon. I do work with you and I do call you friend. I mean, we're family now. Like, I mean, I tell you all the time, I adore you. And in case people don't know you, folks don't know you, Christopher gives the best hugs ever. Just want to put that out there.
Thank you.
So a little bit about me. I'm originally from Louisiana, New Orleans. I am a Washington transplant. I moved here as a teen. I have 3 amazing children. I have a husband, and I have 6 grandchildren. So a little bit about my story today. How did I end up in this chair having a conversation with you? Once upon a time, I had been charged with a crime, right? And I did not participate with the investigation. And this crime took place in New Orleans, Louisiana. And being a product of my environment, that if I would have cooperated with officers or whatnot, where I'm from, they would call it what they would call a blackout, which means that, you know, as newer terms today, modern terms, snitches get stitches. Is that what they say now?
I think, yeah. I think that's one of them.
Yeah, and so therefore I had too much at risk, right? My family, my parents, everybody, and so that wasn't an option. And so I ended up being incarcerated in the Louisiana Institute Correctional Center for Women. Once I was released, I moved to Washington State. It was super, super difficult to get acclimated, right? It was like super difficult to find my bearings, find my footings. When I came, it's like I was looking for a job. I couldn't get a job based on my criminal history. I was educated already, but still, like, I needed money. I needed income to take care of my family. And so I struggled with that. So once I got to Washington, I ended up driving as a young adult, and I had the lead foot, right? Mm-hmm. And so at that time, being so young, you never understand the consequences of racking up speeding tickets and not paying them. To one day I looked up and it was just way too many as a young mother to try and, pay those tickets off to have a valid driver's license, right? And so over that period of time, I was doing construction at that time, right? I got into the new program, which is a non-traditional trade for women. I ended up journeying out as a cement mason, but after that, there was no public transportation that was going to let me off in the middle of a freeway to get to and from work, right? Have you ever seen a bus stop in the middle of the freeway to let passengers off?
Does not happen.
It's not happening. So with me having unpaid tickets, that led to my license being suspended, right? So I'm like, okay, how do I deal with this? But I needed immediate results, which was money, right? To provide for my family, provide a roof over our head. Me not being able to do that led to me being an unhoused individual. And as I ended up striving still to try to get back on track, I kept driving, right? And which means that I was driving without a driver's license, which means that I was arrested 17 times for not having a Washington State driver's license. That led to, again, that cycle of incarceration, right? I was going to jail back and forth. I did a total of 2 years on house arrest. And I finally went to I was doing a probation check, right? And I went before the judge. I had to check back in. And I hadn't made much progress as far as seeking employment or what I could do, just because every time I tried, right, the background is always those barriers, right? And so the judge told me one day, Michelle, I know you have this potential. One thing about the criminal system is like once you get in it, it's like a hamster wheel. It's hard to get out of, but it can happen if you're willing and you're committed to this thing, being no longer impacted by the system. So with that being said, the judge said to me, I'm going to give you an alternative. If you can't find a job, I understand, great, but you need to get enrolled in some type of non-traditional, traditional technical schooling or whatnot, right? So I was like, I'm not really trying to do the school thing, right? It's like I did that through high school, like that wasn't my jam, and then I had an AA degree, and I'm like, I did that too, but it was super difficult to navigate school while being unhoused with 3 children at the same time. So I was like, okay, well, the only thing I can do is go back to school, right? And so I went back to school, and while in school, it became more difficult. Why? Because I navigated the barriers of I was houseless. I didn't have access to Wi-Fi, so I was getting pulled over and getting tickets in my car because I was camping out in parking lots like a McDonald's just so I could have access to the Wi-Fi, right? I was in residential neighborhoods in the dark, so guess what? I have there's a suspicious vehicle in the neighborhood, right? So then I'm explaining to officers all the time, and of course, because now I've had all these tickets racked up and things like that, it was like, we don't care. So now my mobile home, literally, which was my car, was being towed constantly, like all the time, right? And so I had to navigate those many different barriers. So with that being said, one day I was having a conversation with a friend, and I actually that friend drove me to court that day, and we were having a conversation. And he was like, hey, guess what, Michelle? He's like, I know, I see you striving. I see you trying to get it together, right? He's like, there's this amazing organization that helps individuals who are formerly incarcerated justice involved. I was like, no way. Like, really? Like, because when I got released and been on probation, they don't give you all these resources that people think they give you. They pretty much tell you what to do. You don't have a transition plan, right? You're not released with a transition plan. You're not released with much of anything. If you're lucky, you may get released with a voucher for 6 months for some type of, shared housing or something like that. But that was not an option.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky, as you know, correct. And that wasn't an option for me because guess what? What was my barrier? I had 3 small children. Right. So I had been couch surfing, bouncing back and forth around, with different family members and friends and things like that. And I ended up meeting Amanda Dubois, who is the founding visionary the visionary for civil survival. And how that came about is one day she invited Ardell, my really good friend, and I to her office, and she had shared her experience about being in a space, and she was there was some individuals who were formerly incarcerated, and they were sharing their stories about the barriers that they experience today, like when it comes to paying child support, again, when it comes to employment, when it comes to education, right? Things that you don't have access to. I didn't have access to federal financial aid at that time because my crime was committed against the federal government, right? And so it's like, I'm going to go back to school if I can't get financial aid. I definitely can't afford it out of my pocket. Right. And so when we were talking about this with Amanda, she was like, this is it's not awesome that I'm going through these things, but she was like, oh my gosh, my eyes are really open now that I had no clue about what folks experience when it comes to incarceration. She goes, I'm a lawyer, right? I make good money helping folks get divorced every year, right? So I was like, okay. And so, but anyways, hearing the stories of those other individuals is what she said, that was the day her eyes were open. And she's like, I have to do something about that. So probably maybe 6 months after meeting in her office in Northlake, she's like, we're going to start we need to get this group going. And, what is it going to look like? We don't know. All we know is that it's grassroots, right? That's where we're going to start at. So with that being said, I started, she was the first individual since me navigating incarceration, in and out of jail. She was the first individual to offer me a job, making $25 an hour, helping folks get registered to vote. So my friend and I, we were at the Hemp Fest, getting folks to register. We were like community events that were taking place. We were just like all over the place getting folks registered to vote. And at that time, I was like, wait a minute. A lot of folks that have been out for a long time, and I was learning as I go, right? So a lot of folks that have been out of the penal system for like a long time, they're like, oh my gosh, I did not know that I could vote. That was the day that I said, I have to do more to educate myself as well as others about their rights. And so Amanda had wrote this book series, and how I got a little bit further in life was when she wrote this book series. It was like 4 books that she wrote. It was like knowing your rights when it comes to a car accident, knowing your rights when it comes to renting an apartment. I forget what the other ones were. But at the end of the day, reading those books, I learned so much that I was able to go to the tenants union and have a conversation with them about, this is my background, this is what happened, this is why I'm no longer housed, right? I didn't get very far, but they did hear my story, so that was super cool, right? Anyways, later on down the road, I had enough. I had enough of, I was driving still. I'm still getting tickets, right? Trying to get to events that I'm striving to help in, the community, right? But I'm going to risk getting a ticket trying to get there. And so it just became too much again. So I was incarcerated again. That time I had to sit down for 5 months, right? And then once I was released, I ended up being on that house arrest for the first time for a year. And during that time, I was like, it's the perfect time to go to school. So I went back to school. I was working as a work-study student. And while I was working as a work-study student, I realized there's no students on this campus that identify as formerly incarcerated, justice involved. Like, am I the only one? Because being on the campus, I'm like, what resources do you all have available for someone such as myself? I identify as reentry, right? That's my recovery journey, because at all costs, I have to avoid having a negative interaction with law enforcement. Reentry for me is a lifestyle. Of course, I got, caught, smoking a cup, snorting a couple lines here back in the day, right? I think we all done some of the things, but that just came with the lifestyle, right? But the ongoing incarceration, it just was impacting my credit. It was just impacting my job, my ability to seek gainful employment, livable wages, right? And so once I got on the campus, I asked my advisor, I said, hey, how do you guys, do you know if you have anybody who's like formerly incarcerated or justice involved that, I can talk to and kind of get some support from? And they're like, no, sorry. I was like, okay. So I asked my probation officer, there's nope, sorry, we don't offer anything to that nature. So what does Michelle do? So I had been at Highline for about the first 2 years. I had graduated, and I said, I want to become a reentry advisor. And they're like, what? I was like, you guys aren't paying attention. Like Tacoma College now has one. Skagit Valley now has one. And they were already doing the work in the prisons, right? So like Tacoma Community College at the time, they were going in the prisons, helping folks, get enrolled in classes during that time, right before COVID hit. So I went to my dean and I said, this is me. This has my name written all over it. And I want to be able to, implement that same model here at Highline College. And my dean was like, Michelle, yeah, sounds good, but I don't think we're the environment that's ready for that. I was like, what do you mean not ready? I mean, this is a college that's, if you look at the demographics, we're right in Des Moines. There's over 110 languages spoken on this campus. What do you mean we're not ready? And so she was like, you know what? Fine. let's create this position for you. We'll give it a trial for 1 year. It's a contract for 1 year. We'll see how it goes. After that, we'll reevaluate and see if you want to continue your position, right? That first year turned out to be the best year of my life. That first year in that role, I didn't no longer have to be ashamed of my past because I found my people. And they all felt the same way I did, right? They had different crimes from, all different type of crimes that were committed, right? And one individual told me one day, he's like, yeah, I'm a felon. I was like, no, you're not. You're somebody who was convicted of a felony. And that was the first day that I really understood what change talk meant and what stigmas really meant and what labels really meant. And that was the day that I said, I'm no longer bearing shame. I'm no longer bearing guilt. And I'm going to share my story because hopefully sharing my story will help other folks, right, live and walk and talk in their truth. That first year, it became something I never dreamed of happening. We ended up starting a reentry club on campus, right? There's a bunch of us. We had a big event. The elected officials came to attend, and it was called Decarceration Day. I did a bunch of research at that time, and I understood what mass incarceration meant and what population of folks that it really impacted, right? And just knowing that I had my peers who were also college students that had the same background as me. Some were getting out of prison. Some were on what we call GRE, which is graduated reentry, which means that they were going to finish their sentences in the community, whether that means that, they're probably on house arrest for an additional period of time. And then we had a legislative breakfast where I facilitated that. And I just, was sharing with, at the time, it was Joanne, who was our rep for our district. And I was just sharing the struggles of someone who identifies as reentry on a college campus and striving to. And I mentioned to him one time, I said, nobody asked me what my needs were on this campus. And one of the needs that was really strong for me is that I really felt like that I needed was a teacher that understood my learning style, right? And I put on a workshop. I was like, the Reentry Club and we put on a workshop, and that workshop consisted of all faculty and staff members, elected officials that we invited, and there's a couple, issues that we had. First of all, we no longer want to see furniture that's been purchased from the state, which has only been purchased from the correctional industries, right? That's where all the furniture came from. We know what correctional industries is. We know about it all, right? How folks are building this furniture, putting it together and making less than $1, right? I'm like, we don't want any more of that furniture here, right? And then not only that, but it was not just a furniture thing, but we had what do I want to call it? It was a discussion, let's just say that. And it was, we had formulated questions, everybody in the club formulated questions for the faculty. And one of my questions is why is it that any of the teachers never ask their students, what is your learning style, when they're thinking about different backgrounds, where folks come from, right? What's the origin? I'm a non-traditional learner, right? And so I was excited that I was able to sit there and have that conversation with the faculty because I said, this is my learning style. I love English 101, but me, again, if you say it's a comma, I say a semicolon goes there, right? And so one day I was sitting there at the event that we created. I asked my instructor, I said, this type of English and all these books is just really difficult for me to just grasp, right? It's like speaking Shakespeare's language. So I was like, can we tailor my English 101 course around mass incarceration? A little different, I know. It's a standard English 101, but I want it on this subject because now my own experiences said, I'm not the expert, but I want to learn more. I want to connect with this part of my life in a different way, right? Which was through education. And so I was able to do that, and I graduated. Yay! Yes, I did that. I passed the class, and then that just opened more doors, right? It says this within that first year that it worked. Then I was promoted, right? So the other thing that led to, I would say, is just being passionate about when we're talking about student-led conferences, student-led, engagement. I said, how can I incorporate needs in reentry in this institution, right? And what did I do as something that you and I both normally do? We build relationships, we outreach, right? We looking for collaborations. I was able to do that, and we through my advocacy along with the other students, we were able to obtain a reentry grant for Section 8 students. So for you identified as Section 8 on the college is a program that I gave birth to. I would say it was called WISH, because there was some times where I'm doing homework and I just wished that I had a place to lay my head for my children and I told my story to the folks at Section 8 King County Housing Authority. Thank you, King County Housing Authority. And they provided our folks with, they provided the college with 50 rotating Section 8 vouchers, which allowed our students to be able to rent a fair market rate apartment, what have you. And then it's not like once they graduated, of course it was going to end. But however, we were able to write in the amendment in there that says, hey, can we at least have 6 months grace period, once the individual graduates, to be able to get on their feet. And if they can sustain the rent of the apartment, they can just live there and pay the rent on their own, right? But I wanted to make sure there was an agreement or a contract where they're not excluded, because we know historically, like a lot of times I hear from family members, friends back in the day, like, well, if your spouse is there, your partner is living with you, they can't be there, they can't be on your lease, you can't do these things. So that was one of the things that I was not going to have. They can have whoever they want living with them as long as they're abiding by the rules. You're maintaining that 2.8 GPA, because I know everybody learns different, right? So you still at least taking one class. So it's like, I made it kind of simple. I wanted to make it almost like a hoopless system, even though it wasn't, hoopless, but it was easier to navigate than it is traditionally just trying to find a place to live, right? Anyways, moving forward, we combined all that together within higher ed. I loved it there. I'm excited that the legacy I left at Highline College. So the WISH program is still operating to this day. I went to Temple University to learn more about food insecurities, and had an amazing a time at the conference there. And I went back. I would spend 2 weeks at Temple University on campus just learning, and then was able to come back, and we were able to implement a food pantry with other partnerships and food banks on campus for those who were also food insecure, right? So again, I say I'm excited that both of those programs are still functioning at Highline College today. And how do we get to where Michelle is at today, right? I called my good friend at Civil Survival, who I was still working for part-time, right, as helping folks get registered to vote. And I was like, I can't do this anymore. I love what I'm doing, but I just can't. It's too time consuming. I'm having to come up with gas money to get to and from. The biggest thing is that you forgot that I'm unsheltered. And I'm still striving to show up because I'm passionate about this. It's something I believe in. And so the founder of Civil Survival, she says, I hear you. She says, you know what? Let's change that for you. And I was like, what does that mean? And she was like, how much do you need to move into a place that's spacious enough for you and your children and something that you can afford every month? By this time, again, it's strange that folks will see you, they see you, you go to work every day, you have a career, but at the end of the day, no, I'm still not making ends meet. Contrary to popular belief, no, we don't make a lot of money in higher ed as, academic advisors. So anywho, I was working still and unsheltered, and she's like, we're going to change this today. What do you need to move in? I said, well, I don't know, because every time I try to apply someplace, I got turned down again because of my background, right? So with that being said, she goes, let's not worry about that. Let's not talk about that. What can you afford every single month? Say less. Civil Survival is going to give you all your moving costs. All we ask that you do is maintain the place. Say less. I got it, right? Civil Survival changed my life. I am an original founding member, and that day when I was able to have shelter for me and my children, there was no turning back. This is where I'm supposed to be. This is my passion. This was my pain that I carried for a long time. And I've been housed since the day Civil Survival said, we're going to write a check. Even when it came, they wrote the check. So graduating just from there, and then just still, I have LFOs, legal financial obligations. I got $25,000 in LFOs. I don't think I'll ever be able to pay them. And just Civil Survival growing as much as it did, like rapidly. Next thing you know, we were having workshops, we were having financial LFO day, which is helping folks, get some of their legal financial obligations reduced. I benefited from that. My legal their financial obligation, I think it was $24,000. By the time I walked out of court, I was able to go to the counter and pay $1,200. Justice, to this day, Justice Mary Yu was the judge that I went before. And she's like, I believe in you and you can do this. How about we do this thing, right? I had no idea what she was going to say, but to go from $24,000 to $1,200 and being able to walk away paying that, I knew again, that's another piece of the fresh start that I had been longing for, right? And so today with Civil Survival, I'm on the board of Civil Survival. I did all the workshops. I used to be the main facilitator. I facilitated workshops. And I know, I think with the workshop that we had in Tacoma, we had $16 million in relief at that event, just for folks to be able to get back on their feet and just, getting a little bit of glimpse of hope of what it feels like to be able to not have that over your head anymore. And so with that being said, I continue to do all the workshops and things like that. The one that I'm most proud of with Civil Survival is I one day was sitting in a different workshop with a different organization, and I met some individuals from the ACLU and Columbia Legal Services. And I knew I wasn't the only one, but I'm like, because there's more talk about this driver's license things, right? Suspension and folks, getting their cars towed and all these amazing things. And so, not amazing, but it's like they think it's amazing when they're taking your money for no reason, right? It's like, it doesn't make sense. But anyways, I think that led to, man, my emotions are everywhere right now because you're having me relive. And I'm grateful. I'm so grateful. I was talking about, the car being towed and all that cool stuff. But going back to when I had that relief with the LFOs, that led to me saying, there's more. I just don't know what it is, but that's more. If it's happening like this, like barriers, I even changed my name to the Barrier Buster. If you tell me it's a barrier, I'm going to bust it wide open, right? Because my friends in my community said that I can do so. And I believed in me once again, that restoration of my self-esteem, and just owning my story and speaking truth to power. I learned how to go to testify at the Supreme Court. Well, I learned civic engagements. Let's go back there. I learned civic engagement. And then I was able to help other folks understand what it's like to have a conversation with your elected officials. I've interviewed a lot of individuals, former Senator Patty Murray. I love when I interviewed Senator Patty Murray. She's like, hey, Michelle, guess what? What? I can tell you everything about saltwater fish, but I can't tell you anything about the criminal legal system because there's nobody coming to talk to me about their experiences with, incarceration. But everybody's talking to me about saltwater fish, right? Mm-hmm. So with that being said, going back to my point to where, speaking of that, is when that changed for me, when I met with the individuals from ACLU and Columbia Legal Services, I shared my story about being arrested 17 times, right, for driving with a suspended license. They're like, hey, we're going to partner with you on this. Tell us more. And I was interviewed a couple of times by Crosscut, KUOW, PBS about my story. And so the most exciting part about that is that my story got out there. There was a law that was written based on my story when it comes to driver's license suspension. And the law passed, right? And so that means that your license your driving privileges would no longer be suspended for unpaid tickets. Folks have to get their kids to and from the doctors. They have to get their, family. You have to be able to get around if you don't use public transportation, right? So when that happened, I was like, if my story and my voice and my truth can just change one life, many lives, one day at a time, then my job is done. It's not done, but I'll be super excited that thing happened, and it did happen, and it went viral, right? Because everybody's like, Michelle McClendon, we know her, and then next thing you know, it's like on all the social media posts and everything's like, yeah, because of you, I got my driver's license back. Not only were those individuals able to get their driver's license back, but they were also able to obtain employment that they wanted to do. So a lot of folks were able to get into construction and make a livable wage, right? Because a lot of construction trades require that you have a driver's license, right? So that was one of the most rewarding things that law passed. To this day, the next one that I've worked on a bunch of advocacy things. I've worked on a lot of bills. So civil survival, I'm excited to say we're the ones who, like I said, my story, there was the driver's license bill that passed. It was the New Hope Act that passed. It was, which ones else do we have? They removed all of the questions about have you been incarcerated off of the college applications. That was based on my story. So I was like, why are you asking me if I committed a crime just to get into college, right? Like, what? What does that have to do with anything? So that's no longer on the applications as well. And then the Clean Slate Act, right? So I was able to benefit from all those things. To sum it all up, here we are. I'm working at Public Defenders Association with you, kind of doing somewhat similar, same work, working with the same population, but more or less stabilizing, businesses, community members, right? Addressing all the public safety initiatives that goes on within our prospective precincts. Today, I'm a homeowner.
With all the challenges that come along with that.
Yes, that whole part. Don't forget that. I'm a homeowner. I never thought that I would have a credit score over 700. I do today. I own a car. My children are thriving. They're all college graduates. My grandchildren are amazing. And I just know that at the end of the day, this work is not done for me. I think the day that this work will be done for me is the day that I think they cover me up with the dirt. So, I've navigated all the challenges, all the barriers, and just have an amazing community and support system. Folks like you, Lisa Dugard, who poured into my life. And that's how, Lisa's always calling. She's like, who do you know? And it's because I was out there. I was telling my story. You folks need to hear this. I know I'm not the only one going through all this, right? Everybody needs to hear this. So I was one of those who shouted from the mountaintops. And here I am today where I have a livable wage. I have an amazing, healthy family. I have amazing grandkids. I do have homeowner association dues.
Yeah, it's a gift.
Yes. So that's who Michelle is today.
Well, that is a remarkable journey. And really, in so many ways, your story speaks for itself. We're actually close to time. So, so really, thank you, one, for sharing your story.
Absolutely.
It's an amazing journey to think about, where you started to where you are now.
Absolutely.
To go from no hope to being a provider of hope at this point. There's just a couple points, you said a lot of things, and, we're limited on time, but I do want to pull on two threads real quick and give you an opportunity to elaborate a little bit on them before we close up. I think one thing that I heard is really, about like the misconceptions around the criminal legal system and incarceration and second chances. I think people have this idea like, if somebody just works hard enough and just pulls themselves up for the bootstraps, they can do it. And I mean, it's completely inaccurate, one. And then two, I heard you talk a little bit about food insecurity. And obviously that's a really important topic right now as, we're watching millions of people in this country go hungry.
Absolutely.
And there's no need for it. But I think the commonality between those two things and the thread I want you to pull on a little bit is the necessity for social services, the necessity for the type of work that we do, because these systems, these bureaucratic systems are so complex that even experts that do this every day have a difficult time navigating them.
Yes. So
how is somebody who is living in their car with 3 kids, trying to go to school, doesn't have the financial, has a criminal record working. How is anyone supposed to do that? So speak briefly on that, and then because I think that's an important thing to say.
Yeah, very true. All the things that you just mentioned. I think one of the things that propelled me to kind of like hold it together was fear, right? The fear of consequences. When you're trying to navigate being on probation, right, with all the barriers that I had, it's like no matter what, you have to be in compliance, because if you're not, I'm going back to jail. I did not want to be away from my children ever again. And it was super difficult to navigate those things, because a lot of times when you talk about public servants, or when you talk about, probation officers, judges, lawyers, public defenders, nobody has time to really be looking at your case, right? It's just, oh, yep, it's a rush. Or they'll say, there was times where, a public defender would say to me, oh, sorry, I'm late. I just got your case. And we're, okay, so you want me to plead guilty? Like, no, what? Like, no. So I think recognizing that our system it's overwhelmed. The systems are overwhelmed. There's not enough resources, if you ask me, for anybody to be able to be represented fully or 100% understanding. So I think that, it's our responsibility as community members, as family, as, employees, to uplift those things in those spaces, right? Like, I think that's why it's really important to use our voices. And anytime we get the opportunities to show up, at the Capitol, on when it's, when it comes down to, advocacy day or whatever, I'm there because no one's coming from the Capitol knocking on my door asking me, well, what are you dealing with today, Michelle? What's the barrier for you today? So I think that we have to continuously be in the position to keep reminding these individuals that we're here. We've overcome this, not because, they had much to do with it, but we were here because of our strength, because of our stories, because of our collaboration, because we went out seeking, the answers to this. So I just believe that we're just gonna have to keep having those conversations with our elected officials, right? Like, keep showing up for public comment and things like that, because otherwise they're not gonna come knocking on your doors for those answers. And it's super difficult. It's really hard. It gets tiring. You're spinning your wheels. It gets tiring just knocking on the same door, no answer. But I learned that eventually you will get an answer.
Yeah. Well, especially with local politics. I mean, I think that's a really important point, especially in today's political moment.
Absolutely.
National politics in so many ways are out of our control.
Yes.
But, if you show up to city council, if you show up to King County Council, if you show up, and talk to your elected officials in Olympia, those people do listen.
Yes.
They might not give you a lot of time, but they will give you time.
Yes.
And they will listen and they care.
Absolutely.
And that is where the real change happens, at the local level. And, we get the great opportunity of seeing that every day in the work that we do, that, if you advocate, if you show up, things happen.
Absolutely.
So, well, before we close, I just want to ask one more question.
Sure.
Are there parting words that you'd like to leave for the people that are listening and watching today? Like, what's your closing statement?
Interesting that you asked me that today, right at this moment in time, because I was working at home today, and a friend had reached out and was like, I'm navigating this thing. Can you help me, navigate it? Can you give me any suggestions? What should I do? Whom should I talk to? And by the time I got off the phone, I was kind of like overwhelmed because my heart was aching for them, right? My parting words is, what is your why?
Yeah. What is your why?
What is your why?
I think that's sometimes the most profound things are the simplest.
Yes.
Why are we here? What is our why?
Absolutely. Changed my life.
Well, Michelle, thank you for the gift that you are to this world, the gift that you are to my life, and the gift that I hope that the people watching and listening today are also receiving. Because
thank you so much.
You have so much to give to this world, and the work isn't done.
Absolutely. We're in this together.
Thank you, Michelle.
I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
I appreciate you. All right. Well, thank you again to our gracious hosts for this beautiful space. Thank you, Temple of the Trees. Thank you to King County Recovery Coalition and to the King County Behavioral Health and Recovery Division. We will talk to you again. Thank you and stay well.